Today we're tying some jigs for ice fishing. Stay tuned. So good morning. Today what we're doing is tying up some jigs for my own personal tackle box. These will be specifically for ice fishing. It's a jig that I've tied before online, if you go back a few years in some of my videos. But it's a favorite of mine. I use it throughout the summer. Like to fish this jig under a bobber, especially if there's a lot of weeds. Perfect for perch. And that's what I'm primarily fishing for in the wintertime, though I catch all sorts of, bluegill, crappie, even bass and pickerel will hit this jig. This color is a favorite of mine, just fluorescent yellow with an orange nose. We're going to tie a couple different jigs, or at least I'm going to talk about a couple different jigs using that 1/16 shad dart head, and what we'll tie today is a 1/8 football head. So let's get things situated. We'll switch over here. So what I'm going to put in the vise is a 1/8 football. Now you can do this with round head jigs, or something that's got more of a minnow profile would be just fine. This is a very, very simple jig. By no means am I, is this something that we're doing just to show off our skill. Perfect jig to teach youngsters because there's very few steps and it's pretty easy. So to begin with, I have a 2/0. This is a regular plain Danville nylon thread, unwaxed. We lock the thread on as normal. I'm using orange just to complement the color of the nose. But you could use black or red. Mix it up a little bit depending on the color combinations that you tie. If I had a different color head, I might use a thread that would complement the head color. And what I have here is just a plain Danville Chenille. This is a size 2, what they would call a size 2. If you're buying tinsel chenille at Cabela's or one of the bigger stores, something like one of the bigger fishing stores, you're looking for a medium-sized chenille. And this is a tinsel chenille, and I'm just stripping just a little bit off the ends here so I can lock the thread on. Exposing that center thread just so I can lock it on. Couple wraps towards the bend of the hook, and then a couple wraps up towards the head. And this is fairly close. I'm only going to get 2 or 3 wraps of chenille. In terms of the chenille in the flash, for this jig, I think less is more. You want just enough tinsel on there to give a bit of flash, but we're not fishing like a big blade. We don't want that type of attraction. So I grab my length of chenille and I'll do 1 wrap, and these are touching wraps, not overlapping. 2, and on this last wrap, I'm going to bring my tinsel to the outside of my bobbin, so when I switch hands, I can just pick up my bobbin and lock that into place. And that was just 2 wraps, so you just have a small ball of flash. The hook is exposed. Like I said, we're ice fishing with this jig, mostly for panfish, mostly perch, and we tip this with a minnow, a small minnow, or minnow head, or a waxworm, something like that. And we're usually fishing this either by itself or under a perch rig. you know, as the weight on a perch rig. Next, I take a small Hackel. Now I call this small just because I'm using it on smaller jigs. If you measure the Hackel fibers on this feather using like a fly tying gauge, it's a number 10. Basically what you want is when you wrap this, you want the Hackel fibers to extend half the hook gap past the hook point. That's what you're looking for. You could go a lot longer with this and really make them fibery, spider-like or web leg, kind of like a buggy legs kind of thing. But what I've found is just past the hook point. So half the distance from the hook shank to the hook point past the point of the hook itself. And on this, first I'm going to snip just the webby stuff off, and I get down to the fibers that I want to use, and then I'll take my scissors and I'll just cut about a 1/16 of an inch up the stem of the feather, and to leave those little barbs. That gives the thread something to wrap around as we lock it in place. This feather, the back is kind of bent down, so I know this is the back side, this is the darker color side, and this is just a rust colored feather. It's a kind of a tan, a reddish tan. You could use black, orange, chartreuse, the fluorescent yellow would also work really well. I like using just this rust colored feather. I think it looks really good. It works well. It shows up enough underwater, you know, the fish can see it without being too dark. You know, black, I think I would use black if I was tying a jig that was black, or use black tinsel, something like that. But it's also not white and kind of disappears in the water, so a little bit of color on that. So I just hold it on the outside here as I put a couple wraps. There's 3 wraps on top, and then I'll put one more wrap and just angle it so it goes underneath that tab of the stem of the feather. You can take your Hackel pliers. I'm going to do 2 wraps between the jaws of my vise and my thread, and then on this 3rd pass over I'm going to just angle it so it's on the outside of my bobbin. So again, I pick up my I switch hands so I can pick up my bobbin with my right hand and just wrap. Oop. We're going to fix that. We're not going to cut this out. That happens. This 2/0 thread is fairly thin. It did not unravel because it's kind of trapped in between the fibers. So to fix that, I just use another Hackel pliers just to keep tension on that thread. I'll take just a drop of head cement for safety. Maybe we will tie that dart just so we can get from start to finish without snapping the thread. Re-thread my bobbin. What we'll do, a couple wraps to lock that on. Cut my tag on. I know this feather is locked into place, so I can trim this away. Now if your feather's long enough, You can use it and wrap another jig. This tip I keep in a small box because that's perfect for tails for crappie jig. So we're going to save that. And let's take 3 wraps around my bobbin. And I can put a couple wraps just to lock that in place. I can trim that tag end away. So that's locked into place properly. To finish this off, I'll just take my whip finish tool. You can whip finish this by hand, but I angle the tool so the top thread slides along the top of the jig, so it will push back any of the fibers that might be leaning forward. And then on 3 wraps, and we're done. Nice and snug. And to finish this off, we'll just add some lacquer-based head cement. And we're done. That's all there is to it for this pro football. It's a real pretty jig. It's very effective. And like I said, we're using this for ice fishing primarily, but it also works great in the summer. So let's switch this around. So to complete the jig, start to finish, here we have the 1/16 shad dart. Also another jig head I just love using, especially when we're fishing for perch and other panfish, crappie and bluegill are the 2 others that we're mostly fishing for. Again, we lock on our 2/0 nylon thread. If you can't find the 2/0 thread, you can just use any regular fly tying thread. You just want a fairly thin diameter. And I prefer unwaxed, though you can use a waxed thread. Flat thread is okay, though most everything I tie on a jig is using a round nylon. So we lock in our tinsel. And again, less is more. You could wrap the entire shank with tinsel and give it a lot of flash, though we find it's not really necessary. You just want just a tiny bit of flash. We're not attracting fish from far away. We're just trying to entice those fish that are there checking out your lines. So do 1, 2, and a 3rd wrap to the outside of your bobbin. So when you switch hands, you can pick up your thread and start wrapping. And I already have these feathers separated into these smaller bags. This is what was left on a neck, a Chinese neck. Just something cheap. I'm not using expensive Hackel feathers for this type of jig. And usually on a neck you'll have some much longer hackles that I might use for streamers and things like that. And then as you get towards the end of the neck itself, and those feathers get smaller and smaller. A lot of times guys will throw those away. I separate them, small, medium, large, and I usually do an extra small. Just a little baggy, keep my feathers in, and I can use them for jigs like this. So again, I lock this into place. About 4 wraps toward, just locking it on. I'm not walking it up towards the bend of the hook, but just keeping it right there in the collar area. Again, with our Hackel pliers. 1, 2, and the third wrap, I angle it to the outside of my bobbin. So I switch hands, pick up my bobbin. And again, angling the bobbin so the thread slides along the head of the jig and helps trap any fibers that want to reach forward, but it keeps them behind the thread. And then we can finish this off. So these are very quick and simple to do. You can sit and tie a whole bunch, just sitting in front of the TV or listen to the radio. This is a color that I just love to use. It's very productive for me. The fluorescent yellow and orange, very popular color in almost every type of lure for ice fishing. But this is what I call a pro dart. And what we call the pro football. 2 great jigs, very productive in the summer, but like I said, we're using these for ice fishing. So I'm going to sit and tie another dozen or so. I got to fill my box, and the buddy I fish with mostly during ice season wants a half dozen of each. So I'm doing a few different colors. I might turn the cameras on as I go through some of the other colors. I got to do blackheads. I'm going to do a brown. I also switch it up just a little bit. Different chenilles. Here's a copper color. Here's a golden color. And then of course we have kind of a rainbow. This has purple, green, as well as silver and copper in it. So we're going to do a bunch more of these. I'll probably sit down a few times over the next month or so, and we'll turn the cameras on at least once or twice as we tie up some of these. I gotta paint a whole bunch. I found a bag that I thought I painted very well, and the paint looks awful. So we're gonna scrap that batch. I'm gonna paint up some things that are nice and fresh. And we'll sit down and tie. So I hope you liked what we did here today. If you have any questions, put some comments down below. Let me know your favorite lure for ice fishing. Like I explained, we're sitting here in central New York State. I'm hoping, like all ice fishermen, for a quick, early, cold season that is a very long winter. So that's what we're hoping for. Early hard water that lasts until, I don't know, April, May. I'd be happy April 1st, right? So if you like what we did here today, go ahead, put your comments down below. As always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. And until next time, guys, tight lines.